Hello, dear speakers. I've got your newest episode of Critique My Speech all ready for you. Be sure to stick around to the end where I'll be giving you 3 takeaways that you can apply directly to your next presentation. Hi, my name is Nancy Hardcastle. I'm a public speaking coach, and I help badass speakers in the field of human trafficking tell their truth on their terms in a way that their audience can't resist. Today, I'm critiquing a Tedx talk delivered by Carly Church titled Domestic Sex Trafficking, A Survivor's Perspective. Buckle up and let's get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm really grateful that I get to come and speak to you all about something that I'm so passionate about. So I'm going to speak to you today about domestic sex trafficking. This is something I hold very dear, being a survivor of domestic sex trafficking myself. This is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I've dedicated my life to bringing awareness to this ever-growing issue.
So Carly's doing 2 things really well right now. She's making a lot of eye contact. If you notice, she's looking around and she's making sure that she's connecting with as many members of the audience as she can. She's also quite fluent. She's not pausing too long. She doesn't seem like she's not able to remember what she wants to say. She is zooming right along.
So today what I want to focus on in the time that I have is I'd like to define domestic sex trafficking for you. I want to paint a picture of what human trafficking looks like in an Ontario context and walk you through the stages of commercial exploitation to give you an idea of what this really looks like. Media and movies portray human trafficking to look one way, and it looks completely different than that. And then
what Carly just did is a preview of what's coming next. A preview is particularly effective when you have a long talk or a training. People are wondering, where am I going with you, speaker, in the next hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours? So this can be helpful if you have a particularly long talk.
End by talking about how we can all ignite change. I'm a huge believer that education is power, and I often wonder if somebody came into my high school when I was growing up, would this have happened to me? Or would I have been able to identify those red flags before it was too late? I'm not sure, but I think I would have been equipped with a lot more information that would have helped me when this started to happen to me.
So you might have noticed that Carly is kind of swaying, and she's just moving from side to side a little too much. So swaying, you don't want to sway ever. You can move from side to side, but you want to move intentionally. You want there to be a reason that you're moving. And also, the good thing that I like is that she mentioned that this is something that's personal to her, and she brings up the idea of, I wonder if I had known this information when I was in high school, if it would have made a difference. So this is good because it helps us to imagine this individual that we see standing before us. Perhaps their life would have been different. It's not just people in general, but perhaps this young woman, Carly, could have had a different experience.
So I'm going to jump right in, and I really want to start by defining those words, domestic sex trafficking. So I'm going to differentiate between domestic and international so we can understand that they look completely different. So the best way to differentiate between the two is to think of it the exact same way you would if you were to walk into an airport. Really, you have 2 choices. You can take a domestic flight or you can take an international flight. If you take an international flight, it means you're getting on that plane in one country and you are landing in a completely different country. If you take a domestic flight, it means you're getting on that plane in one country and you land in the exact same country. It means
I think that's a great explanation of the difference. She's just made it as simple as possible. That's really good because it helps people to understand and just get it right away. So good job on that example.
Same thing when it comes to human trafficking. International human trafficking means you are from one country and you're brought to another country for the purpose of exploitation or the purpose of trafficking. Domestic human trafficking means you are from one country, either born and raised.
I want to take a bit of a closer look at this slide. We see at the top, it's exactly what she's been talking about, domestic versus international, and she's got this photo. I would say the photo isn't particularly helpful because an airplane doesn't necessarily indicate either one, right? An airplane can be international or domestic. She's speaking in Canada, and so the Canadian image, the image of Canada, sorry, does help us to understand that that's related to domestic. The other thing I want to say is that she's got a lot of information on this slide. And this is just a really common problem that speakers have when they're creating slides. They want to communicate a lot. They're excited to communicate a lot, so they put a lot of information on the slide. So what happens here, as soon as Carly put up that slide, the audience starts reading it. And you can't read and listen and watch somebody speak at the same time. And so most people will read. And that means whatever you're saying is gone. In fact, you may not have even been listening to me right now because you were reading the slides. So it's a great example if that's what happened to you. And I understand. So what you would want to do, there's a couple options that you have in this case. One is just make several slides. The other one is don't even need this slide. I would say that her example made it super clear. Her explanation made it super clear. This is what it is, and this is what it's like. And so I would say, I don't think I need a slide, and I would guess that nobody in the audience needs a slide because she made it so clear. So another part of creating a slide is asking yourself, do I really need this slide in the first place?
You are from one country, either born and raised or have come to this country for whatever reason, nothing to do with trafficking, call this country your home and then are trafficked within that country. The majority of human trafficking that occurs in Canada is domestic sex trafficking. The UN's stat says that 71% of all trafficking that occurs in Canada is domestic sex trafficking. That means this is happening to our young people. This is happening to people in your schools, in your communities, in your neighborhoods. It is not an issue that is happening somewhere else. It is happening to people here that call Canada their home. Next, I really want to give you that definition of what human trafficking is.
All right, so you can see, even though the camera hasn't given us a close-up, you can see how much information that she has on this slide. And you can even see in the audience, people are not looking at her, they're looking at the slide. So it's the same issue. They're going to be reading all that information on the slide. And when they're finished reading, they're going to look to her. So let's go ahead and keep looking at the slide, and then I'll give you the fix for it.
So human trafficking really is an umbrella term. There's many forms of human trafficking. But again, today, I'm only talking about domestic sex trafficking. The reason being is that's my area of expertise, and that's the majority of what we see here in Canada. So the UN has a definition for human trafficking. The Criminal Code has a definition for human trafficking. They're very long, they're wordy, they're hard to remember. I have a cheating definition. It's super easy to remember, so I use it all the time.
All right, before she even gives us the definition, I want to say that this is really smart to do. It's great to acknowledge, you know what, there's all these hard to remember, technical, wordy terms out there. I'm going to give you the easy way to remember it. Very good.
Elements that have to be present in order for human trafficking to exist. If you have these 4 elements, then you have human trafficking. So there needs to be force, there needs to be fraud, there needs to be coercion, and it all needs to be facilitated by a third party or a group of people.
When she was saying force, fraud, and coercion, I was actually looking on the slide to find those words because my eye was drawn right to the blue and the black. And then I realized, oh, she's going through the elements on the left. Couple things here. First of all, the color is what drew my eye. And that's a good thing to remember. So if you want to draw somebody's eye, if you want to draw attention to a specific thing on your slide, use that pop of color. The other thing is the contrast with these colors in this black box is really good. The light blue contrasts well with the black, and the white contrasts well with the light blue. So it's super easy to read. So in that sense, it's a good, she did well there. Again, though, the problem is way too much information on the slide. I would definitely break this down and also into multiple slides, but also ask yourself, do I really need for my audience to read all this? If I'm explaining it, do they also need all these words? One option, if you say, well, yeah, they need this, it's important. You can give them a document after your presentation, either printed it out, or in this case, when so much is virtual, you can just send them a document that has all these details that you're concerned that they might need. But for this talk, which it's a TED Talk, it's not long, it's essentially an overview which she's giving us, we don't need to read all the specific details.
Behind the scenes doing it to you and profiting from you. force, fraud, coercion facilitated by a third party. That is the definition of human trafficking. If all those elements are present, then you have human trafficking. So now that we understand what human trafficking is by the definition, I really want to paint a picture for you of what it actually looks like. Because what I said when I first walked in here is that movies and media portray human trafficking to look one way, and they look completely different. So the education that I got growing up around what human trafficking was from movies, and I was taught wrong. So I'm going to...
One thing that I really appreciate about the way Carly speaks, and I mentioned this at the very beginning, is that she's fluid, she's moving, and you really get the impression that she knows her stuff. The other thing is she's reminding us, I told you I was going to tell you about this, and so now I'm going to tell you about this, which I think is also helpful to orient us in where we are and where we're going in her speech.
Walk you through the stages of commercial exploitation. This chart was developed by listening to survivors' stories. This is how it happens.
Okay, so same comment about this slide. Easy to read, but too much information. So same fix. Ask yourself, do I need all this information? Does my audience need to read it? And what can if they do need to read some things, what's the minimum I can give them on a few slides? So I always suggest the less is more rule. The less you're asking your audience to read on the slide, the better, because then it allows them to just glance up, look at the slide, go, oh, and then look back to you. And that's what you want.
Every single young person I have ever worked with has been brought through these stages. This is a thought-out psychological process that people are brought through in order for somebody to have control and manipulation over. So I'm going to walk you through stage by stage. The first stage is the luring stage, and in this stage, this is when your trafficker begins to assess your vulnerabilities. So somebody isn't just pointing out somebody in a crowd and being like, I'm going to traffic this person. It is thought out. And that's what that luring process is for. So in this luring process, your trafficker is going to begin to assess your vulnerabilities. He's looking for somebody who's vulnerable. He's looking for somebody who has both individual risk factors and societal and systemic risk factors. He is going to begin to test the waters to figure out these vulnerabilities. He's going to put feelers out. He's going to see if you're going to be, if you will be able to buy what he's selling. He does this by asking you 1,000,000 questions.
This is great. She says, this is what it looks like, a little bit like in theory. He's luring, he's testing the waters, he's seeing what he can get away with. But then she gets really specific. How? By asking these questions, and then she's going to list the questions. So she's not settling for just a general idea, but she's being really specific, which is how we learn. We need those details.
And it does not feel like you're being interrogated, and it does not feel like you're being interviewed. It feels incredibly, incredibly special. That for once somebody's taken time out of their life and asked you about yours. For once somebody stopped and noticed you were struggling and asked you about it. He's going to ask you about your life. He's going to ask you about your family, your friends. He's going to ask you about your hopes and dreams for the future, the struggles you've been through. And he's going to listen to everything. And what he's doing in this moment is he's gathering information that he's later going to use against you. But in that moment, it feels incredibly good. So you're going to tell them anything and everything. The other thing that they do in this stage is they're going to look at every single one of your basic needs that are not being met. And very quickly, they're going to begin to meet them. So it moves to that next stage, that grooming and gaming stage, also known as the honeymoon stage. So they are going to begin to meet every single one of your basic needs. If you told them in that luring stage that you didn't feel safe at home or you didn't have a safe place to stay, they're going to offer you a safe place to stay. They're going to take you shopping. They're going to get your hair done, your nails done. They are going to wine and dine you. They are going to shower you with compliments, boost your self-esteem, boost your self-worth. They're going to begin to introduce you to all their friends. They're going to make you feel a part of something, that sense of belonging, that sense of family. They're going to tell you things like they're going to keep you safe, that they're never going to let anybody hurt you again, that no matter what, they're going to be there for you. They're continuing to ask you questions and be interested in your life during this stage as well. 85% of the young people I work with identify their trafficker to be their boyfriend or their girlfriend. So we also know it's incredibly, incredibly relational. Even that other 15% is usually quite relational. It's usually a companionship or a friendship, or in fact a family member that's doing it to you.
I want to point out something that she said a few minutes ago, and that was how good it feels. I think that we often in this field provide facts, data, statistics, information, and we often don't talk about how do the people who are involved feel. You might say something general, it was awful, but she's being really specific. You feel special. You feel loved. Really appreciate those details.
If drugs are involved in this stage, they're going to be given to you freely, no questions asked. If they're not involved, they might keep it that way, or they could introduce them in a very playful way. Whatever you need, I've got for you. If you are in that loving relationship, it feels as if you have met your dream man. It feels as if you have hit the jackpot, as if finally your luck has turned around. I cannot stress enough that in this stage, it feels as if this is the best your life has ever been.
A lot of times people wonder, why did this person stay? And they ask survivors, why did you stay? I feel like she just helped us to understand this by saying, this relationship, this situation feels like the best thing you've ever had. It feels like you won the lottery. So when you have something that feels so good that you've never had before, all your needs are being met, your physical needs, your emotional needs, wow. If you've grown up or been living in deprivation, this is huge. This is hard to walk away from.
If your life was not that bad before, they took the time in that luring stage to get to know everything that was lacking in your life. And now they're providing it for you. So this feels as if this is the best your life has ever been. There is little to no red flags in this stage. The biggest red flag is it is too good to be true, and who wants to believe that this is too good to be true if nobody has ever treated you this way before?
I just want to remind you that Carly isn't speaking theoretically. This was her experience. She knows what she's talking about. And she does a great job of portraying that authority.
The red flags don't come in until the next stage. So the next stage is the coercion and manipulation stage. This is when your trafficker begins to give you all that love and affection and then pulls it all away. And then gives you all that love and attention and then pulls it all away. It's like you're walking on eggshells. You're wondering, is he going to have a good day today or is he going to have a bad day today? You actually start to think in your mind, what did I do wrong? I must have done something wrong, because I know he's capable of treating me better than anybody has ever treated me before, so I must have done something. You actually start to think in your mind, you start to feel indebted in the relationship. He's done so much for me in this relationship. What have I done to contribute? So you might actually start to think things in your mind that you can offer in that relationship. But before you can do that, he's going to start to ask you to do things. And he's going to ask you to do things that you're probably not comfortable doing, or they're going to ask you to do things that maybe you talked about in the luring stage that you said you would never do. Those are things that you held on to. Those are your morals and your values that you were never willing to step out of that comfort zone. He's now going to ask you again in this coercion and manipulation stage. And you're going to be much more likely to say yes because you just want it to go back to that honeymoon stage. You just want him to treat you in a way that you know he's capable of treating you, which is better than anybody has ever treated you before. So as soon as you start to do those things, he's going to give you all that love and attention back. And then he's going to pull it away again, and he's going to ask you to do something else. And as soon as you do it, he's going to give you all that love and affection back.
Carly is really delivering on her promise. At the beginning, she said, I'm going to paint a picture. And she's really painting this picture. I saw some people say in the comments, this is the best explanation, the best description of the grooming process that I've ever seen. And I would have to agree. I've heard a lot of these kinds of talks explaining what happens, and I definitely agree. The picture that she paints is very specific and really helps us to get the idea. I want to point out something else about the way that Carly speaks that portrays her authority, and that is she never uses up talk. So up talk is when you go like this, and instead of making a statement, it sounds like a question. The effect of this is uncertainty or lack of authority. So imagine if I said the same thing. Up talk is when you raise your voice at the end of every statement so that it sounds like a question. I'm not asking you when I say that. I am telling you. Carly never uses up talk, which I think is part of why she comes off really powerfully.
What he's doing is he's breaking down your boundaries, your morals, and your values, and then he's rewarding you for them. So he could ask you to do things that are sexual or not sexual. If they're not sexual, they might ask you to do things like hold drugs for them or lie for them or look out while they commit some a crime or rob somebody maybe. And immediately after, they give you all that love and attention back. Or it could be sexual. This is where they start to desensitize you to certain sexual acts, prepare you for the sex trade. So they might ask you to send that naked picture they've been begging you for. They might ask you to make a video with them. They might ask you to have sex with one of their friends. And immediately after, they give you all that love and affection back. It goes back to that honeymoon stage, and then they pull it all away again. This is an incredibly confusing time. The other thing that they're going to do in this stage is they might do something called conditioning, where they have sex with you, and shortly after, they take you shopping. Or they have sex with you, and shortly after, they take you to get your hair done or your nails done. And then that slowly gets replaced by cash. They'll have sex with you, and then they'll throw you $60 and say, oh, baby, that's amazing. You're so good at that. Go treat yourself. Go do something nice for yourself. Your brain actually starts to associate sex with a reward, sex with money. The last thing that
I just want to reiterate that Carly is responding to this idea of, well, why would you go along with this behavior? Why would you stay with a person who is behaving erratically and who's pushing your boundaries and who's asking you to do things that are uncomfortable? She's providing this answer in this situation of this conditioning that your brain starts to associate doing these things with getting nice things. I really appreciate the way she's breaking everything down.
In this stage is they're going to build a wedge between you and anybody who's healthy in your life. So they're going to pick fights with your friends. They are going to blow up stories that you maybe told them way back in the luring stage, that something that your family or loved one did to you that really hurt you. They're going to blow it up and amplify that. They want to build that wedge. They want, when something goes wrong in your life, that the first person that you call is them. They want you to be 100% dependent on them. I used to work with a young woman who her trafficker actually used to go into her phone and delete messages from loved ones who were reaching out. She actually started to believe nobody else cared about her, that he was the only one that loved her. He was the only one that she could depend on. This is when he has you exactly where they want you.
You may have forgotten about this slide. It went up a long time ago. All this time that she's been talking, this slide is being displayed on the screen. This is really distracting because you want to listen to her, but then perhaps you're wondering, okay, where are we in the stage? Perhaps you didn't get to read it the first time. Perhaps you got distracted by something that you didn't see the first time. So you need to be strategic about how you're using your slides, how long they're displayed, and then, like I mentioned before, how much you have on the slide. The idea is that you want the slide to support your presentation and not distract from your presentation. So this is certainly not the kind of slide that you could glance at and then look back and continue listening to the speaker.
This is when they'll bring up the idea of working in the sex trade. This is when it moves to that full-on exploitation stage. And they may bring up that idea of working in the sex trade in a variety of different ways, but it's usually either extremely direct or the complete opposite, incredibly, incredibly insidious. So if it's direct, he's literally going to say to you, you know all that stuff I've done for you? The clothes I bought you, the condo you've been staying in, the drugs I've given you, it's actually not free. You owe me money, and this is how you're going to pay me back. And if you don't do it, I'm not going to love you anymore. I'm not going to be there for you anymore. I'm not going to take care of you anymore. I'm going to circulate that video we made. He's got all the ammo he needs to use against you to get you to take your first trick. And once you...
Great details. This is how it happens. This is how people get sucked in. I've heard this so many times, but she is breaking it down in a way that is very powerful.
Then again, he's got even more ammo to keep you there. If he goes with the insidious route, what he's going to do is he's going to bring up the idea of working in the sex trade by playing off information he gained from you way back in the luring stage. So maybe in that luring stage, you told him that your dream for the future was to one day create your own loving, supportive family. Maybe you told him growing up you never had that and that was your dream. You wanted to one day get married and buy a house and have kids and really create that loving, supportive family. So he's going to say something to you like, you know that life you want to have? You know that wedding you want, that house you want, those kids you want? I love you so much, and I don't want to wait any longer. I can't picture my life without you. I got this crazy idea. We'll make stacks of cash. We'll only have to do it for a couple months, and no matter what, I'm going to love you. No matter what, I'm going to be there for you. Of course you're going to say yes. He just sold you a dream. your exact dream that you told him way back in the luring stage. This is what human trafficking looks like. It does not look like the movies. You're not kidnapped. You're not moved from place to place. You're not locked in a room. You're not beaten every day. This is what it looks like.
Great summary that she just did. She brought us back to her original point. What does it look like? Doesn't look like the movies. She showed us all that goes through. Then she pauses. It was a great pause. She says, this is what it is. And so I think if you're new to this topic now, you would be saying, oh, now I get it. And that's what she wanted.
I want to touch on why it's not as simple as asking somebody to leave, because it is horrific. Just because you believe somebody loves you doesn't mean you don't have to do things that you never thought you would do before. You have absolutely no control. So I can tell you from my experience, my traffickers had taken all control from me. I hated every minute of it. I had no idea who was coming to my hotel room door, and I had no idea what services I was expected to provide. I hated every minute of it.
It's a good idea to bring yourself into a situation, to talk about yourself. And I like how Carly does this. She doesn't overexpose herself. She doesn't give graphic details, but she does say, I hated this every day. This is powerful. We get the picture, we connect with her. It's a good thing.
The most traumatic and horrific experience of my life, but as crazy as it sounds, my life was still better than before I had met them. I had a roof over my head, I had food in my stomach, I wasn't withdrawing on the streets in the freezing cold. I would have done whatever it took to keep it there, and I would have never walked out of that hotel room door. Physically, I could have. I was not locked up, I was not tied in a room, my pimps were not there 24/7. Physically, I could have opened my hotel room door, I could have walked out, and I could have asked for help. I never would have. There are 3 reasons why I wouldn't have left, and after working with young people for quite a few years now in similar situations, these are the 3 reasons why people don't just leave. The first is the obvious, the fear. I was afraid of them. There was some physical violence in my situation, and all I could think is, if I walk out this door, what are they going to do to me? That fear was real. More so than that, though, it was the fear of the unknown. If I walk out this door, where am I going to go? Where am I going to get my next meal? Where am I going to sleep tonight? Where am I going to get my next fix? And who is ever going to love me again after this? Who is ever going to take care of me? That was much scarier than they were. And the final reason I didn't leave was the psychological hold that they had on me, the trauma bond. It is unbelievable how strong that is. They picked me up off the ground when everybody else had given up on me. They were there for me when nobody else was. They treated me better than anybody had ever treated me before. The best way I can really explain that trauma bond is I'll tell you a very short story. It happened to me after I took my very first trick. One of my pimps came in the room and he sat down on the bed beside me and he looked at me in the eyes, and it was so genuine. Every time I tell this story, I can in fact still picture the moment, and it still feels just as genuine. Logically, I know it's not, but that's how strong it was in the moment. He sat there and he looked at me in the eyes and he said, Carly, I am so proud of you. And he said it because I told him way back in the luring stage that the only thing I had ever wanted to hear growing up is that somebody was proud of me. Now he said it. Didn't matter anymore who was proud of me or what they were proud of me for. Somebody was finally proud of me. I was finally good at something. I was going to do whatever it took to hear that over and over and over again. This is what human trafficking looks like.
That's the power of a specific example that has to do with yourself. I feel like I've been repeating myself on this point, but it's important that when you're giving details, they're vivid, and if you can talk about details from your own life, even better. And again, she's not overexposing herself. They're not graphic details. They shouldn't be. You shouldn't overexpose yourself. I'm never suggesting that. This is a good example of expressing to the audience, this is how it felt, this is what happened, these are the specifics, and she really even goes into detail. I remember it so clearly, and I remember how I felt. We get the picture because she's so specific, and it has a stronger impact because it's her personal example.
So really quickly, just to end, what can everybody do today? Starting today, how can we ignite change? And it's simple. We need to educate others. You need to educate yourself, and you need to educate others on what you've heard today. continue to look into what human trafficking really looks like. Know the signs. Know how to identify who might be being trafficked, and know where the resources are in your community and what to do if you identify somebody who could be being trafficked. You need
So this is Carly's call to action section. It's great that she has it. I always recommend that you have fewer items on your call to action section, however. I know that it's really tempting to put this long list because there's so many things to do, and they're all important. However, studies have shown that the more options a person has, the harder time they have making a decision, and in fact, the less likely they are to do any of those options. So when it comes to a call to action, fewer options is actually better, 2 or 3 max. The other idea here is that you want to make them very specific. So saying educate yourself is pretty general. I would try and be more specific, something like go watch all the TED Talks on human trafficking, or get this book, or start with this particular website, because then people don't have to wonder, what should I do here?
You need to advocate for change. You need to advocate for more resources, and you need to advocate for more funding, specialized.
Advocate is a great action to take, but again, who are we advocating? How are we doing it? Are we writing to a politician? Are we joining an organization? If so, how do I find that organization? So I think you get the point that when you have these general call to actions, there's too many steps involved for the person to figure out what they should do. So the more specific you are and the fewer you have, the easier it is for them to say, oh, I'm going to do that one right there.
In human trafficking. And lastly, I'm going to put these two together, but we need to know consent and we need to empower youth. Get people to come and talk to in your schools about what human trafficking is. Talk about the true definition of consent. We were taught wrong growing up. You need to let people know that consent has certain elements that have to be present. It must be clear, it must be coherent, it must be willing, and it must be ongoing. And again, empower our youth. Give them more socioeconomic opportunities. In fact, boost their self-esteem and boost their self-worth. If I can leave you with one thing today, it's that if a young person is empowered, it is incredibly difficult to traffic them. Thank you.
I think this is a great point that she makes at the end about how a youth who is empowered is really hard to traffic. I would have liked to hear more about that and also have her reflect a little bit back on what she said earlier. So in her case, if she hadn't been so emotionally vulnerable, if she had grown up feeling that somebody was proud of her, if she had had a secure place to live, obviously she wouldn't have been so vulnerable. So empowering youth is both emotional and physical. It's helping them feel good about themselves, know that they are loved and that they're doing great things, and of course also having their basic needs met. I want to give Carly some suggestions for improvement, but before I do, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to critique your speech. It's really good for me to be able to critique speakers who are at differing levels along their public speaking journey. And Carly explained to me that although she's done a lot of trainings, she hasn't done very much public speaking, such as this TED Talk. It was very brave of her, therefore, to say, sure, Nancy, go ahead. And in fact, she had a really enthusiastic attitude. She said, yeah, bring it on. I want to know everything I need to do to improve. That's a great attitude to have, and I know she's going to go far. My first suggestion is to deliver your presentation in the mirror or make a recording of yourself and really notice the way that you're moving. Remember I mentioned that in this, swaying too much. And also you tended to use the same gestures over and over again. Gestures is a little bit tricky because you don't want them to seem unnatural. Yours did not seem unnatural, but they seem too repetitive. So think about that. Think about how you're moving and how you're gesturing. My second suggestion is try to have an introduction and a conclusion that's more robust. So your introduction was essentially, this is what I'm going to talk about, and this is my topic. So telling us your topic isn't really an introduction. In your introduction, what you want to do is say something that's going to grab people's attention, that's going to suck them in so that they're like this and they can't wait to hear more. It's actually sort of to your well, I don't want to say sort of, it's actually to your disadvantage to tell people right up front, because if they're not interested in that topic, then they're likely to tune out. You also want to take the time to create a fairly robust conclusion. The idea is that it should feel wrapped up, perhaps summarize what you said or reiterate your point. I like the point that you gave of that youth who are empowered are less likely to be trafficked, but let's hear a little bit more. Finally, I would go ahead and redo your slides. You didn't have that many. I don't know, probably you have a lot more for your trainings, but I really encourage you to redo those slides so that, as I suggested earlier in the critique, the audience is paying more attention to you and you're not losing them as they read all the information on your slide. There's no reason not to have a lot of slides. I know that sometimes people are given a limit, or there's this idea that some number is too many. It's not too many if the audience just glances at the slide and then looks at you. And if you need a lot of those glances, that's fine. The other thing to consider is to have some kind of a document afterwards, or a link to a document afterwards, which would have the details. It's takeaway time. First takeaway for you is to think about if you're using personal examples. So go through your speech and say, do I ever talk about myself in here? Am I ever giving an example from my own life? It's not mandatory, but it really helps the audience connect with you as a person. And that's important. The more connected to you your audience is, the more likely that you can persuade them, the more likely that they're going to listen to what you have to say. Your second takeaway is record yourself, and when you're watching it, pay special attention to your body language. What are you doing in terms of movement? How are you gesturing? Does it feel natural? Does it seem there's too many repetitive gestures? How about your facial expression? Do you ever smile? Are you frowning the whole time? Are you just kind of like this the whole time in a serious, scared look? Whatever you see, take a note and then try it again, and just try to focus on one thing at a time. I suggest that you don't make a list of 10 things that you want to change. It's too overwhelming. Just pick 3. Pick the top 3 that bother you the most and work on those, and then record yourself again. I know that a lot of people feel really uncomfortable watching themselves on camera. This takes some practice. It takes time to get used to. So if you really want to improve as a public speaker, it's pretty mandatory that you do this, and it's pretty mandatory that you get used to seeing yourself on camera. The third takeaway is consider your audience's experience of your slides and how you're delivering your presentation alongside your slides. So what I mean is 2 parts. The first part is sort of the easier part is, what does the slide look like? Is there a lot of information on the slide? Is there too much information on the slide? You just need to cut it way down. Remember the less is more rule. And the second point is, are you asking your audience to look at a slide when actually you want them to be paying attention to you? Or are you leaving a slide up there, say for example, a quote when you're speaking and they've already read the quote? If that's the case, you want to get rid of it. You want to just put up a blank screen so that you have their attention focused on you. The idea here in general is that you're trying to control where the audience is focusing. So you remember, anytime you put up a slide, they're going to be focused on that slide. If you don't want them to be focused on the slide, take it down or make it really simple so that they glance at it and then they look back at you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks again, Carly. Really appreciate your enthusiasm and wanting to learn more. I appreciate everybody's enthusiasm in wanting to become a better public speaker. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe to my channel, like it, comment. You can find me at standupbegreat.com. And if you know somebody or you yourself would like to be considered for my next critique, please reach out to me at info@standupbegreat.com. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.